What is up, everybody? This week, alright, so I've been filming this last video for several weeks now just because I've been so sick. I'm gonna do my best to try and edit this all together and make it into something interesting. So hope you guys stick around. Well, the reason that we had to take a little break was because Turkey Day, that took up a weekend, so I couldn't really do anything there because I wasn't around. After that, I've been kind of sick. I know it's only the first week after Turkey Day, but so basically about Thanksgiving, I got the crud. I got the thing that everybody's been getting going around. It's not COVID or anything like that. It didn't really knock me out sick-wise, but it just gave me this cough that was just lingering. I think it's going on 3 weeks now, and this weekend is I'm finally starting to feel better. I'm starting to feel like I'm actually getting some sleep again. So yeah, things are finally looking up, and the camera's out of focus. So hopefully we can get this thing all figured out now. It's like trying to focus behind me. That's weird. There, focus on my face. But that's much better. So yeah, things are looking better. We're really in winter now, so this little garage actually gets pretty cold, but I can get it up to about 55 degrees when I'm working out here, so that's not too bad. So it does kind of suck rolling around on the cold concrete and whatnot, but better than my last place that would have been cold and wet. This is a big upgrade. So in this video, we're gonna tackle a bunch of just kind of random things. I'm gonna get the starter on the truck. I'm gonna get the wiring kind of fixed up and cleaned up. I'm gonna get the power steering lines hooked up to the power steering box. It's not that exciting, you know, stuff like that. I'm gonna start this thing, which you just saw. So we'll get that going. And then I'm working on kind of the rear suspension a little bit, just doing some little things, fitting up shocks and whatnot, figuring out hardware and whatnot back there. Let's take you along for the ride. I also still have Poots Garage stickers, so if you would like one, just shoot me your mailing address to pootsgarage@gmail.com and I'll send these out to you. So if you remember, last time I worked on this thing, obviously my old starter under there was not looking so fresh, so we're gonna put that fresh unit in. And then the wiring was in really bad shape. It was cooked from the headers under there, so I'm gonna pull some of that out and see what I need to do to clean that up and fix it all and get it all roadworthy again, so I don't have to worry about that later on. And then we got that nice little starter blanket to put on this new unit to keep it nice. Plus this is a mini starter, so there'll be a little more room for airflow between those headers and the starter, you know, to keep all the heat out of there. So I think it's gonna work out pretty good. Man, this YouTube thing just got a little bit more expensive. So this is my tripod that I like to use. It's a nice little sun pack unit I've had for years. But my handle broke off. There's supposed to be a little handle there that I crank this to go up and down. Now it's stuck as high as it'll go. Jesus, I gotta buy a new one. So help me out, guys. Like, comment, and subscribe so I can keep getting this stuff replaced. Come on, man. So we got the starter off here, so we're just kind of hanging from the wires. Obviously I don't care about these wires, but I see a couple issues right off the bat. Obviously we knew this thing has been cooked by the headers, and you can see how bad. You can see them wires there. Those things are pretty toast. These over here are basically bare wires. This one broke off already, so that was a problem waiting to happen. And then the other thing that kind of surprised me is the solenoid there. One of those screws came loose, so my whole solenoid is actually loose. So I'm really glad I pulled this thing off right now, and we'll get this thing fixed up and cleaned up. That just got better and better. So the whole main lug completely snapped out of there. That plastic is so brittle, it just broke as soon as I started turning the nut. So that was not good. And you know, obviously you can see this. You can see how the gasket's been melted out of it. So I was almost thinking, well, I can replace the solenoid and just keep it as a spare, but I don't even know if I want to bother doing that. Probably just toss this whole thing in the garbage. Here's the size comparison of the two units. So this is the old one. Obviously, I don't think I need to point that out. But yeah, you can see that size-wise, big difference. So this little guy here, we have a lot more room in there than this one. I did find it interesting, these, I kept reading everywhere that a manual transmission vehicle needs to have the cast iron nose piece on the starter. But this one was an aluminum one and it fit just fine. So maybe that's just on the older stuff, in case anybody's wondering about that. So I gave this thing a couple test fits and it already has some clearance issues. So one thing you can see is where this one mounts up, how the solenoid is offset to the side, because the engine block would be right through there. And this one is not, so it's obviously hitting right there, all through there. So these are clockable, so I can remove these 3 screws and then we can clock the mounting block here to where we need it. Alright, that looks a little more conventional there, so I'm going to throw this back up in there and see how it fits. Got the starter kind of mounted up there, roughly. These wires are hot, so I try not to touch those. What we're trying to do is verify this pinion gear clearance. Well, the clearance I can't really check because there's just no room to check it with it installed. But I'm trying to check the depth of how far it goes on the flywheel. It says it wants 50 to 75% of the depth of the gear that's on there. So let me show you something real quick. Alright, so I've got the main power disconnected. That's the battery cable back here. It's not connected to the starter motor so it doesn't spin. But I'm using a jumper to just jump the solenoid, just to jump that, bring that pinion out so I can see the clearance on that flywheel. It's kind of hard to work on this stuff that's installed. So you can see when I go like that, the gear comes out and it kind of mashed right there, so I got to turn it a little to get it to line up with the flywheel. It might have moved that time, so somehow I have to measure that. Per our instructions here, yada yada yada, on the pinion depth, we should be able to remove this and remove the pre-installed shim to get a little more depth out of that pinion. But doesn't have a shim in here, and I do have a shim that was included in the kit. So this is the shim they wanted me to take out, which it's already out. So I can't go any deeper on the actual pinion depth of this thing. So we're just gonna have to hope and pray that it works out fine. You can see how it moves out. The only other thing is too, the flywheel on the truck itself is the teeth on that are getting pretty worn down. So like the front faces of them is really missing some, so that's going to contribute to some of the depth that it's going to see. So hopefully it'll last, hopefully everything will be good. Like I said, these pinion gears, I can actually replace this piece if it were to wear out prematurely or whatever, but the truck itself shouldn't, really needs a new flywheel and all that stuff anyways, but we'll save that for way down the road when something really bad fails. The next thing I do before I put that thing in permanently is I gotta clean up all this wiring. This stuff is in really bad shape. Obviously it's broken and whatnot. So I'm gonna be cutting a lot of this back, and I'm not sure how far up the truck I wanna go or if I'm just gonna replace it right up here, but it does have a little, see if you can see in here with our little light, it's got this metal sleeve that's mounted right back here. Kind of keep bending it around. So I can't really go too far. Well, I can take the sleeve off and just get rid of it or something if I want to, because it only goes up to the back there, right to the back of the motor. But it's kind of nice to have there for heat wise, but I don't know how far in there I want to splice it back yet, so I got to play with that. And then I've got the battery cable here. This is easy because I have a lot of excess line here. It's not the biggest line either, but this looks like something I probably made myself. I don't know, I must have not made it too permanent. But I do have a crimper coming on the way, which I won't see until after this weekend, so I can put nice line or ends back on these, so I can cut this thing way back and reuse a lot of the excess I got, and then reroute it a little better, maybe try to go maybe above these cross members and above the engine mount and all that stuff. So hopefully it'll clean that up a little bit. So All right, so you saw this thing just fired up, so we are doing all right. So I didn't get any video of anything, but I connected the power steering lines to the box down there. That's nothing too exciting down there. You can't see anything. Anyways, see, I still don't have my steering shaft. I got to order one of those. And then dumped a bunch of fluid in the reservoir up there to get it all ready to go. We've taken care of the starter now, so let me show you how that turned out. And there it is. So I didn't get any video of this just because I needed a day of just kind of working on things and just kind of taking it easy, you know, whatnot like that. We have our new starter in there. It's all fitted up, bolted down. Our wiring's cleaned up. This is actually the battery cable here. I rerouted it above the motor mount and all that stuff, and then I put it in some loom, just, you know, some wire loom just to help protect it so it doesn't rub through on any of the sharp edges. And then I re-spliced. I ended up just cutting the end off that was melted because I had enough cable left, so cut the end off, put a new end on. I'll show you the tools that I used for that I had to buy. And then you can see I just did the same thing on the small wires too, and obviously it worked great. And then I ended up throwing this little heat shield blanket on there that I'd shown previously. I think that's going to work out pretty good. I got a lot more clearance now in my header here. Okay, it's not hot yet. So I got a lot more clearance. This starter, they actually recommend not using a blanket on these. So maybe because they don't want the heat to be contained in there, but I think I'd rather keep the heat off the outside than, you know, worry about overheating the inside of it. So we're going to run it. And then they recommend just using like a heat shield, probably to keep an air gap around it or something. But we're just going to run that for now and see how it works out. But it looks a lot better. It's a lot cleaner. I got a lot more clearances in there, so everything looks great under here now. And at this point, since we got steering box in, the braces in, I think we are ready to start hanging the front axle. I did want to start it just to make sure, and the starter's working great, so let's move on. So this is the new tool I used to actually crimp on those battery cable ends, or just a little eyelet. So I bought this kit off Amazon. It's all made in China. It's not the best stuff, but it actually works pretty good. So for what it is, I think we're good to go for this for a long time. So this is the actual crimping tool. You can see it's got little rotating discs in here that have the different sizes, and you can see that hole in the middle is how it crimps it. So it crimps it into like a hexagon shape. So it worked pretty good. You can see they don't really line up perfect in there, but it is what it is. It worked. It came with these pliers too. These are actually the cut cable, which actually worked really nice. Cut right through that battery cable, no problem. And then it came with all the with these ends here. So yeah, it worked. So in the rear here, you can see I got a couple more items hanging off of this thing. So I've been kind of doing I did a few things off camera. One of them is I put the caliper brackets on. I just wanted to see some more color on this. So you throw those on real quick. They're tightened down, ready to go. The other side, I had some issues with the threads being kind of gummed up. So it took me a while to get that all cleaned up and whatnot, but it's all good now. And then I'm currently actually working on the shocks. So I got the tops bolted in. The bottoms I ran into issues with width of the bushing versus, you know, the brackets and stuff like that. So I went and I got some hardware, which I actually didn't have hardware to begin with. So I think we're gonna be all figured out on that now. So I can put that together and use a couple washers to space things out properly in there. And then I kind of hung the brake line in there just to see where it wants to go. So once we get that buttoned up, which is pretty much just gonna button up the shocks here, and maybe I'll tighten up the springs, you know, because those bolts are all loose. Oh yeah, I also figured out, I don't know if you guys remember, I was talking about how I was having an issue getting the nut on the back side of the brackets for these, because all I had was that little tiny hole in the bottom of there to sneak a nut up into, and I couldn't do it. So I don't know why, but I randomly just thought, well, what about the backside? Oh, there's plenty of clearance there. So I already got the nuts on, put them on by hand. Jesus, I'm so stupid. I don't even know. I probably would have been easier to take them apart from that direction too if I didn't. I don't remember how I took them apart. But anyways, I think we can go through and we can torque everything up here and be done with the rear springs and everything. So yeah. So we're under here, and you can see the top of the mount, or the shocks are already mounted on there. Those are just the factory stud style with just a nut and a washer to slide on. The bottom, I had this issue with this gap on the lower axle here is a little wide. So I also had to buy new bolts so I can get everything to work properly. And hopefully these bolts are long enough. And yeah, I think we'll make this work now. I got some brand new, these are just grade 5. I didn't go grade 8. I don't think it's really necessary on just a shock. These aren't coilovers or anything like that, so these should work perfect. These are also 1/2 inch. There's no way you're gonna break that. So let's get this on. Also, you'll notice my axle actually hangs lower than the shock can. This is actually gonna be a great opportunity in the future to move these shock mounts from below the axle, which is actually in the way of, you know, damage when you're wheeling and stuff. Move them up behind the axle tube or in front of the axle tube. Then my shocks will be plenty long enough. So that's a good little opportunity there to maybe increase a little more wheel travel and whatnot. So that'll be something in the future. But for now, we're just gonna jack the axle up a little bit, get these bolts in. The axle can hang from the shocks. That's not such a big issue. The biggest issue is you don't want the shocks to bottom out. That's the bad part. Hanging from the shocks, not too bad. Bottoming out is really bad. And just from what I've understood is the reason for that is because when you're hanging, you know, it's fully extended, you're only hanging the weight of the axle, and maybe the spring might be pushing down just a little bit. It's not that big a deal. When you bottom out, the entire weight of the vehicle is on that. So that would be bad. Done with that. You can see we are all bolted in. Pretty exciting stuff. It's not focusing. There you go. You see the washers in between the bracket there to kind of take up the space. Actually ran into an issue. It was hard to get them in there because the brackets were already crushed in a little, so I had to open them back up just to be able to fit those washers in. It looks good. Got both sides done. These shocks are done. I think I'm gonna go through and torque everything now on these rear springs. Next we got to cut down these U-bolts because these are way too long. They're gonna, you know, hit things and they're just way too long to even be able to get your socket on to torque them down. So I'm gonna leave a little bit just for future, you know, modifications just in case. Try and leave about 1 inch or so. So let's do it. All right, look at that. Check that out. So, our springs are done. We're torqued, both ends. U-bolts are torqued. The shocks are done, shocks are torqued. So all that's really left back here is putting together all the outside brakes and the hubs, and then doing the brake lines. I'm about to make some metal lines probably, but that's about it for the rear. Next is the front, but it's getting kind of late here, and I gotta edit all this up, so I'm gonna save the front for the next video. So I will talk to you guys later.